Hello, and welcome to Crosscut Talks virtual sessions, a conversation with Governor Jay Inslee. I'm Mark Baumgarten, the managing editor at Crosscut. I'm coming to you from the Crosscut newsroom at the KCTS 9 studios in Seattle, Washington. And in a moment, I'll be handing this event over to Governor Inslee and my colleague, Donna Blankinship, for a conversation that will touch on Washington's response to the coronavirus pandemic, as well as the unrest that has gripped Washington state and the rest of the country in recent days. But first, I want to tell you how this event will work. The format is a fireside conversation that will include questions prepared by our team, as well as those submitted by our readers in advance. We had hundreds of questions sent in, so thank you for helping us shape this conversation. During the interview, all of you will be muted, but the chat feature will be enabled. We encourage civil discourse, and we will be monitoring the room to make sure there is no offensive or inappropriate language. Also, we'll be recording this event and we'll send you more details about how to watch it in a follow-up email. We'd like to say thank you to Waldron for sponsoring this event, and we'd like to extend a special thanks to all our Crosscut Festival sponsors. Live events like the festival aren't possible right now, but we'd like to acknowledge their continued support of Crosscut's mission. Trusted information is a vital tool for our community, now more than ever. The Crosscut events and stories you care about are only possible because of donations from our members. Your investment means we can continue to create independent, equitable journalism available to all. No subscription or paywalls ever. Please consider donating at crosscut.com/support. Okay, let's welcome our guests. Governor Jay Inslee, and in the interviewer's seat, Crosscut News and Politics editor, Donna Blankinship. Governor, Donna, welcome to Crosscut Talks.
Thank you, Mark. We promised our readers and we promised you that today would be a conversation about Washington's pandemic response. But of course, first we need to talk about the protests. President Trump said yesterday that if our states don't crack down on protesters in their cities, people he labeled domestic terrorists, he will be sending in the federal troops. He also ordered peaceful protesters in broad daylight to be tear gassed so he could have a photo op. Will we be seeing the army on the streets of Seattle anytime soon?
I really doubt that. The one thing about Donald Trump is if he says it's raining, it's probably sunny, and if he says he's sending the army, they probably are not coming. That's just his modus operandi. So I really don't think that's going to be a serious concern. But we now have lots of adequate law enforcement officers. We do have our National Guard who are serving without weapons in a support role. We have plenty of ability to try to protect these legal protesters. And I want to make a point about these people are protesting. They have a right to protest, and they have a reason to protest, which is the outrageous fatality and homicide in Minnesota. And it is our job to make sure that they are safe during these protests. That's part of our the government's responsibility here. And I have to say that I've seen a lot of outrageous things in my life, but to have a president to claim that he's a friend of the legal protesters and then gas them and move them out of a public space during a peaceful protest where he goes and holds up a book with which he is not familiar, which is the Bible, in front of a church that did not invite him, is one of the most outrageous abuses of public office that I've seen in my entire life. And he should be ashamed of himself. And it would be much better if he is a positive leader than one who continues to look for a way just to show what a tough guy he is, rather than trying to bring unity and peace to this really important national conversation we're having about how to reduce violence against Black Americans, and a broader discussion of how we increase opportunity with the racism that has been so prevalent.
Thank you.
So, anyway, I think we'll be okay.
Governor, can you tell me what you think of the police response so far?
Well, it needs to be reviewed, and this is going to be a long review process about any particular incidents. I think it has been necessary to have some security to prevent loss of life in the city. We were very concerned about the fires that were started. And I think it's been necessary to have some police presence to try to prevent that type of destructive behavior, which really is dangerous. I have to tell you, when I saw those cars on fire next to buildings where people were in the buildings, that was very dangerous. And so I think it's been appropriate to have some security. But I know there's been concerns about some of the incidents, and those need to be reviewed very carefully in a transparent way. And if there was inappropriate activity, then it needs to be sanctioned. And that's going to be
Was
a
there
long
anything
discussion.
you saw on a video, perhaps, that concerned you specifically?
I saw a brief, just literally as I was walking through a room, a picture of an officer with his knee on someone's neck or back. Obviously, those things are disturbing. That needs to be investigated. And I'm confident it will be. It needs to be, because that's the whole point of this protest, is to reduce police citizen violence. Now, having said that, I do have to say this. These conditions are very challenging for everyone, police included. It's challenging for them. They've had, rocks and bottles thrown at them. There's been some injuries, thank goodness, no serious injuries. These environments are challenging for everyone. And I just hope we get through this having a very appropriate protest without loss of life or limb. That's what we're aiming for.
Okay, so, we obviously have another crisis going on in our state and our country right now, and that's the coronavirus. What have your advisors been telling you about this weekend's gatherings and how they might impact the coronavirus rates in our state?
Well, we don't have any sort of modeling on this, but anytime you have thousands of people who are not socially distancing, many of whom are not wearing masks, that's a really significant concern. And we know that, during the flu epidemic, the famous story is told about the two cities, one that canceled the parade and one that did not. And the one that did not cancel the parade had a huge spike in flu deaths. So it is a very significant concern that we have. And certainly we encourage people to wear masks because the evidence is clear that masks can reduce the transmission rate. When I wear a mask, it can protect you. And we hope people that are protesting can at a minimum do that, try to maintain distancing as possible. We want people to be safe. Our goal is to have, one, a very strong message to the country that police violence is not acceptable. And number two, everybody come home safely, including not having COVID-19. So we hope people are trying to keep that in mind during these activities.
So let's take a specific question from one of our readers, and I know you've heard this before. Some people feel like the stay home, some of the restrictions are illogical, and you've made some changes along the way and opened some things up earlier than other things, opened up some businesses earlier. But looking back, are there some things you would do differently if you had a do-over? If you could start this from day one, would you do something differently?
I'm sure that if we look back at this from a year now and we have the luxury of doing a day-by-day account, I'm sure there will be things that will become apparent to us over time. To be honest with you, I just haven't had time to drive in the rearview mirror here. This is a crisis, and I've really got to focus on an hourly basis on trying to keep people safe. And I just haven't really looked backwards very much. The question is, was our timing right? We don't know that for sure, but it does appear that we reduced the curve for this disease considerably more than other states and countries. And so at the moment, it looks like our decisions have been beneficial and worked. And so by and large, I think that we've made good, rational, logical decisions that have actually saved lives in our state, and I feel good about that. The individual decisions are very, very difficult. I have to tell you this. There's no playbook on how to do this. This has never happened before to us. Mm-hmm. So we're making the best decisions on the best science that we have. And as the pandemic has moved forward, our science has advanced as well. I'll give you an example. When we started this, the evidence was really not clear that masks could be beneficial. But now there has been additional evidence to show that masks really do work to prevent transmission. So now that we've embraced what I hope will be a culture of wearing masks, so we've tried to monitor and adapt, and we're going to continue to do that.
The criticism from people who are unhappy with the stay-home order has risen to a level of intensity I'm not used to seeing in Washington State. I'm sure you're feeling a lot of pressure. Do you think some of the frustrations that people have some merit?
Oh, I think all of the frustrations that people have merit. Look, this has been an intense experience that we've never had before, and the frustrations are all sincere and deep. Look, when you've got to not be able to work for months at a time and you haven't got a paycheck, talk about a frustrating experience. If you have a small business that has to be shut down and your life savings are in jeopardy, if you aren't able to see your loved ones, and I haven't been able to see my loved ones for months, and how difficult and isolating people feel. No, this is legitimate, sincere frustration that people have. And so it is not surprising to me that people express that, sometimes in colorful language. That's really understandable. But I think that we have demonstrated quite a wonderful ability in Washington to make decisions based on science, to be willing to comply with these lawful orders. And our compliance has been really quite extraordinary. We've had amazing compliance with our orders. People have actually followed the advice of the doctors and the epidemiologists. And because Washingtonians have done that, that's the reason that we've been able to be relatively successful keeping fatalities down in our state. And the credit to that goes to Washingtonians. And that's where the credit ought to go. It's certainly, I am thankful for what they're willing to do. And obviously we're not out of the woods yet. Look, we're going to have to, for months, sort of run our lives a little differently. We're going to need to wear masks. We still are not in a position to have mass gatherings. I'm very pleased that we're now being able to open up some of our restaurants and some of our places. I hope to be able to, some people can get some haircuts, which I know people are desperate for. It's going to be a while before we get to mass events, but we are making substantial progress on this. But I want people to know that those frustrations are something I share deeply, and I feel them.
Can you also give us an update on the situation with the Employment Security Division, which has been another frustration for people in our state? Where are we in investigating the employment fraud, and are people still waiting to get their checks?
I was just on a call with our congressional delegation that's doing a really good job for us, by the way, this morning, and one of the members said, we want you to know that people are very frustrated, and we want to make sure you hear those voices. And I said what is true, which is I hear those voices at 3 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes when I wake up thinking about, do we have a new way to try to hustle the ability to get these checks to people? Look, this is extremely frustrating to thousands of people in our state. They've been unemployed, and some people have not been able to get their checks processed for sometimes months, because there's something in their claim that doesn't look exactly right, so it has to be adjudicated. That means we have to talk to somebody to look at the claim, figure out if it's really valid or not. So those frustrations are enormous. Now, I think people understand why that is. It's because we've had an avalanche of claims, and this system was not set up for a COVID pandemic that has never happened before. So there's been 10, 20 times as many claims as the system was set up for.
So it's not just the fraud, it's the volume of claims.
Oh no, the volume, the crime is just a second avalanche, but the first avalanche was just the number of claims. So what the department is doing is trying to build as much capacity to adjudicate these claims. So we've hired at least 500 people already, and we have several other 100 people across the state government who are pitching in to the employment security, and we're hiring several more 100 people to try to finish the last group to get these adjudications through. And the difficulty is a high percentage of these, maybe 20%, maybe higher, are claims that aren't, quote, clean. There's something in the claim that doesn't match up with the data. So we have to have one person, case by case, talk to the people frequently and get the right information. So we just need to continue to build that capacity. I can just tell you that I talk to our director at least every other day to try to build this capacity as rapidly as possible. Now, on top of this, we have been attacked by an international crime sophisticated syndicate that by necessity has required the department to turn the dial up on security. And when you turn the dial up on security by necessity, you turn the dial so that it slows down the rate of payment. Talk about a maddening circumstance that these criminals have further reduced our ability to help Washingtonians. It is absolutely angering. We've recovered about over $300 million already, with more to come. And we've now put some new measures in place to try to hasten payment.
Another frustration or worry of our citizens apparently is the plan to do extensive contact tracing. I know this is part of your reopen plan. There's some misinformation out there about this, and one person even wrote into Crosscut to say that they don't want the government coming into their homes and taking their children away, which, you know, I know and you know is not actually a concern. But can you help explain to people more of what will be required for moving into the next steps, the next phases, and also a little bit about contact tracing and why they shouldn't be worried about it?
Well, yes, this is a very well-known technique to reduce pandemics. And we simply are doing the same thing that we've done for decades in the state of Washington. So for tuberculosis, for hepatitis, what happens is if you have that kind of disease that is highly contagious, someone calls you from the Department of Health. In this case, it might be from the State Department of Health. And we now have about 2,000 contact tracers who've been trained to do this. And they'll simply say, introduce themselves, and they will ask you how you're doing, and they will ask, do you think you could help see if we can, if any of your friends or colleagues, we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to get tested since you might have transmitted the disease to them. And they will be asked, not compelled, but they'll be asked to see if folks can help out. And people by huge margins want to help out because they want to help their friends. They don't want to see their friend get a disease either. So they'll say, yeah, I had lunch with my buddy John 3 days ago, and he lives over on Elm Street. And what'll happen is it okay if we call John? And they'll say yes. And then John gets a call from the contact tracer and said, hey, I want you to know that we were talking to someone with whom you've had close contact in the last couple of weeks. And we think we want you to consider getting tested. And it's as simple as that. And we don't tell John who that other person was. So there's still privacy. That the second person doesn't know who the first person was. So the privacy of the first person is protected in this regard.
Other countries are following this approach.
Yes, and most importantly, I think what I can assure people is that we've been doing this for decades with considerable success. We've also trained some of our National Guards men and women to do some of this. And I met them the other day, and they said they're really pleased. People are very cooperative. About 80% of people want to really help, and it's working really well. Now, there's another part of this that's really important. I want to mention it because it requires some help by citizens, and that is that when we do test positive, it's really important that we stay home and not go out and infect other people. And that includes our families, because if I'm in a home and I'm positive, it's really important that the people in that home stay home for 14 days. And so we're going to have people to help that family both inspire and enable them to do that. That's really important. And the reason it's important is that the way I liken this is we've been in a lifeboat for several weeks. It's called social distancing. That means we've stayed apart from one another. We're tired of that lifeboat. It shut down our businesses. We haven't been able to see our loved ones. We need another lifeboat. And this new one is called contact tracing, isolation, wearing masks. And we need to have that lifeboat working. And so I really encourage people to get tested if it's appropriate, be a hero, isolate for 14 days, and help us get on top of this. And wear a mask.
Wear a mask. One reader noted that other states have convened a blue ribbon panel of business owners to help with the economic recovery. How are you tapping Washington businesses, their intelligence? How is the state what is the state doing to help them recover, and how are you getting help from them as well?
Well, we have multiple ways of getting advice from business people and employees. We have three separate subgroups, if you will, to help us recover. And they give me advice on a regular basis. But we don't just rely on a formal system. We have informal systems as conditions warrant. Thursday, I'm having a summit of leaders, business leaders in the manufacturing sector to talk about what opportunities there are for them to make personal protective equipment, to make test kits for our testing capability. We want to build a domestic manufacturing base here in the state of Washington so we don't have to rely on foreign governments or the federal government, if you will. As you know, we've had real problems. The federal government has not been as effective as we would have liked in providing PPE and test kits. I've been frustrated that the president has been unwilling to use the Defense Production Act as effectively as possible. So we're working with business people to develop that domestic manufacturing capability. And we're looking at people from diverse communities. I met with Black business men and women yesterday and had a really good discussion about how to build a more equitable society coming out of this. And just an allusion back to the issue of these protests. Look, we know we have to reduce police violence with citizens, but that's not the only thing. The persistent racism in our society, we need a full-scale effort to reduce income inequality with better educational opportunities, more access to capital, better early childhood education, better health care for communities of color. We need a lot of things, not just dealing with police accountability.
The crisis has put a lot of pressure on the state budget. While tax revenues are down dramatically, I'm sure you're hearing a lot of updates on this from your people. At what point will Washington State need to rethink its coronavirus response because it can no longer afford to do more?
Well, I don't see that as happening. I think we're having a good, vigorous, robust, and largely consensual approach to coronavirus. I come back to this issue that people are very compliant on what we've asked them to do today. I don't think that's going to be changed by the fiscal condition of the state of Washington. Now, we are going to have some difficult decisions, in the months to come in the next biennium, because we're about $6.5 billion or more hole punched in our budget. But I really don't think that is going to retard our ability, or should be allowed to retard our ability to protect ourselves from this virus. That has not been the difficulty at the moment.
Are you thinking of calling a special session of the legislature to kind of deal with some of these issues now instead of waiting till January?
That is a possibility. I've talked to legislative leaders about it. Of course, to do that, we'd have to have a prospect that they would actually produce something. So we don't want to call a special session that nothing gets done. So we have been talking to some of the leaders to see if there's the votes there to be able to do certain things. There's no clarity on that issue. We'll continue to talk with them. Now, in a few weeks, we'll have better financial, vision of what we face, and we'll be in a better position to evaluate that.
Have you heard from lawmakers that they're working on some new strategies, maybe new tax approaches, anything?
Yes, I've talked to legislative leaders. There's no clarity of a plan at the moment. I think they're continuing just to talk amongst themselves to see what might be in the realm of the possible. As I've indicated, we'll have more financial clarity in the weeks to come to make some further decisions. Now, we are very fortunate in our state. We've got several $1 billion in our reserve fund that is available to tide us over till we get to January if necessary.
How many billions in that fund?
It's about over $3 billion. So we have a very significant reserve because we've been very fiscally cautious in that regard to make sure that we put money away for an event like this of a rainy day. I want to give credit to both parties and my predecessors for doing that. Our state has been very responsible, and we're in a much better position relative to other states in that regard in the short term.
Getting a lot of questions about the rent and utility shutoff bans. I think people didn't read the news today. You made some extensions yesterday, isn't that right, about those bans?
Yes, and we've extended those bans. We'll have more to say this afternoon. I think we're having a further press discussion about the details of that this afternoon. We want to help people. We know they're in desperate financial straits. We think this is a reasonable thing to be doing. We know in part because they've had to wait for their unemployment checks as well. That's a double problem that people have had. So we think this is a reasonable response. It has suited us well. We want people to be able to come through this very difficult economic times we're in.
A couple quick questions from the readers. People want to know if they'll be able to travel in July to other parts of the state or other states.
Well, we are now. We have not imposed an absolute travel ban. We've encouraged people to be close, because that every less mile you travel is a less interaction with another person in some fashion.
Right.
I think we'll continue to, at least for weeks, to encourage that. When we'll be back to saying national parks ought to be totally open, I don't know exactly when that is. But I would say that, look, we got a lot of opportunities. You can go out yesterday I went for a walk and I saw a pileated woodpecker and a black-capped chickadee and a few goldfinches just a few blocks away. So we still have a lot of opportunities to get outside. And I just ask people to kind of use common sense, try to not go places where there's large congregations. If you can find a way not to overload some of our tourist destinations, please do so. I talked to the mayor of Leavenworth the other day. Look, Leavenworth loves tourists normally, right? We're advertising, come to Leavenworth. But right now, the mayor was saying, hey, this is not a moment to overload our town. We have medical needs. We just need to cool that for a while. So
Yeah.
I ask people to use some common sense.
So, Governor, I'm getting the warning that we need to wrap it up. Is there anything I didn't ask that you wish I had asked? Any last thoughts you want to share with our readers and the public?
Well, I guess what I would say is we know that this is a challenging time. Our frustrations are probably unprecedented in the state of Washington. What I would say is at moments of frustration, I hope people will find a way to reach out to others, even electronically. I hope that they'll focus on some of the really good stories across the state of Washington. When I woke up the morning after the disturbance in Seattle and saw hundreds of people that showed up unbidden, unasked. They just showed up to clean up the glass and scrub the walls. I saw some 10-year-old kids out there doing that. I think that's the spirit of Washington. I think it's going to help see us through this. And we're improving in a lot of ways, even this morning. We've made progress on COVID. We've been able to reopen some of our state. And the reason, again, I want to reiterate, the reason we've been able to do that is because really smart people in Washington do smart things. And of course, anybody reading Crosscut by definition is a very smart person that's helping out Washingtonians. So let's keep up that great work. Please wear a mask. Keep washing our hands. Better days are ahead.
Thank you, Governor. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Mark?
So I'm going to jump in here and just thank both of you for an informative conversation. Governor, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Be well.
And thanks to all of you out there for attending and for your patience as we work through some audio difficulties. We really appreciate it. Be sure to check your email for information on how to view this recording and details about upcoming virtual events, including our conversation with Senator Patty Murray, coming up on Monday, June 15th. For more conversations with the people